Good evening, everybody. Today is September the 28th. It is about 4:07 p.m. and I'm convening a meeting in the Board of Education, but I'm immediately going to turn the gavel over to Commissioner Amy Malloy. Commissioner Malloy.
Thank you, President White. So good afternoon and welcome to Superintendent Myers-Small, President White, of course, Vice President Elliott, commissioners, and our community members. I just want to say thank you to our board staff and to our communications team, especially Tom, for setting all of this up for us. And as we try to finalize our board goals from the board retreat that was held on August 5th and 6th. So please, thank you. So setting annual goals helps provide guidance to our superintendent so that she can create her own goals and metrics that are aligned with ours. I'd like to commend the board for the great work already accomplished at our annual retreat. It was really clear from the work that we did there that we were in agreement that these were goals we should keep. And indeed, although we continue to work on these specific goals, I think that we've shown a great deal of progress despite the pandemic. Our first board goal was to improve the financial condition of our CSD. Our second goal was to increase academic achievement. And our third goal was to increase equity for all students. So we established metrics for each of these last year, and that means how we will achieve these goals. So it became clear through the collaborative work and exercises that we set up at the board retreat that we all liked these goals, but we wanted to finalize our metrics. In other words, how we'll achieve those board goals. So I would like to highlight that in terms of our first goal, we have made significant progress in this regard. The board adopted a balanced budget and increased our fund balance, as well as established budget parameters and priorities for cost efficiencies. We've also seen a lot of work done on updating our policies to improve the district's financial condition. In terms of our second goal, increasing academic achievement, we have also seen increases in graduation rates, but some of the other metrics used to drive the superintendent's plan were hampered by a lot of the non-testing during COVID and students not being in person for much of the year. So, assessment during the pandemic has been very difficult. Finally, in terms of our third goal, increasing equity for all students, we have seen some progress towards this goal, but are still in progress on some of these metrics. So my goal for today's work session is to do a round robin discussion on each of our goal metrics. I would like us to see some of the stuff that we came up with and kind of brainstormed at the board retreat. So prior to doing this, I would like to make sure that board members are still comfortable moving forward with these three board goals. We all seem to have had a consensus around this at the retreat, and I just want to make sure that that is still the case. So I'm wondering what the best way, Kalia, is to perhaps gauge this. Is there support, or maybe we could raise our hands? I can't see the full screen here. Can I get perhaps a show of hands? I'm sorry, go ahead, Kalia.
Oh, you had asked, I would suggest a round robin to say whether a person support the goals.
Okay. Fantastic. So just looking at my screen, Commissioner Powell.
Yeah, I'm good with not only the three goals, but also the language that's used to describe them. And I'll save all my other comments for when we get to the metrics, okay?
Fantastic, thank you. I see Commissioner Adams.
I'm good with the goals that we selected back then.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Adams. President White?
Yes, I too am good with the goals that we previously delivered for 2021. And I will also let you all know I'm having problems with my audio feed. And so I will leave my video off because it's better uninterrupted if I turn the video off. So just to let you know, thanks.
Thank you, President White. Commissioner Clark?
Yes, I'm very pleased with the goals, the three goals that we have, and like Commissioner Powell, maybe some refinement on the metrics, but the goals are good.
Okay, thank you. Camille? I'm sorry, Ms. Simmons.
Hi, thank you. Yes, I've reviewed the goals. I am in agreement with moving forward. I think they're pivotal buckets. And like stated, some of the metrics I'm interested in revisiting.
Thank you. All right, let's see who's up next. Up here. Vice President Elliott. Vice President Elliott, can you hear us? We don't hear you. All right.
We can't hear either. Okay.
All right, no worries. Commissioner LeBron?
You got the district laptop.
Yep. So I do have some feedback just on the financial portion of the goals. One, I would like to add under 1A that we add and continue actively seeking ways to increase revenues to that goal. That actually ties into our fiscal plan. And then in addition, I would like B and C to be reflective of the 2022-2023 school year budget, because it would make no sense to keep the goals for next year for a budget that we already passed. That's all.
Okay, thank you. And do you approve of the 3 goals in general of forwarding them on to the next year with some changes that you've mentioned?
With the changes that I'm asking for, yes.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner LeBron. Vice President Elliott, are you back? She might be having audio problems.
I'll reach out to her.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. I appreciate that. Is Mr. Patterson on by chance?
He is not at this time, no.
Okay, so let me go back to my screen here. All right, so sounds like we have consensus on that. And I know that we were gonna start with going.
Vice President Elliott is back.
Oh,
Sorry.
she is. Okay. Vice President Elliott, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay, we are just wondering, we're trying to reach consensus, and so far everyone has agreed that we should push forward these board goals for this coming year. Are you in agreement with that?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to be discussing each of those now, each of the metrics, or all the metrics underneath each of those goals. That's what we'll do next. But I just wanted to get consensus around that before moving forward. All right, so let's see. So at this time, I wanted to have the board members share any changes to our board goal metrics for the coming year. And I think we should start then obviously with our first goal of improving the financial position of the district. I do know that our finance chair just made a recommendation. And so hopefully that was recorded and has been written down. Commissioner LeBron, did you want to repeat that for everyone's benefit? We have the goals up on the screen.
It's on the record, I don't know what I would be repeating, but I also forwarded the work earlier to our board clerk. But essentially 1A is adding and continue actively seeking ways to increase revenues. Again, this is tied to our fiscal plan, which is the plan that we're following. And then in section B and C is changing the budget to be reflective of the 22-23 school year budget for both parts.
Thank you, Commissioner LeBron. Do I have any other, oh, I see some hands now. Sorry, I have to go to this other screen. Somehow, you know, you don't use Zoom for a couple months and this is what happens. All right, so I do see Commissioner Powell's hand. Go ahead, Commissioner Powell.
Thanks. My observation was on the first bullet. And it might be a small thing, but it says review policies relating to funding sources. We have no control over funding sources. So I would just ask that we delete the word sources. And I also would like to suggest that because the operative function of this bullet is one of policy, that perhaps Commissioner LeBron's suggestion would be a separate bullet, either a new bullet 2 or put it at the bottom. It makes difference to me because they're not rank ordered as far as I can tell. But I think that Commissioner LeBron's suggestion merits a bullet of its own.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands at the moment. Looking for hands.
Yeah, Commissioner Malloy, I just raised my hand, but I don't know if there is a way in which, and maybe this is okay, but it just seems to be broad in terms of inefficiencies to improve the district's financial condition. My input on that is that I think that what I may think as inefficient, may be a rationale for it to be the way it is. And so I don't know if we need to change that wording of inefficiencies, and I'd like to have my colleagues to weigh in on this. I guess my whole point is that I want it to be, while these are goals, and maybe it's okay, it just seems that we may be grasping if we use the term inefficiencies as opposed to some other language. And it could be okay. I don't know. I'd like my colleagues to weigh in on this, please.
See Commissioner Clark's hand.
Yes, I was struggling with that same concept of using the word inefficiency, because it almost puts us in a bad light, and I don't know what could be used there. But my other issue is, well, my question is, should we have a definition for equity in here? Because when I read through the goals, in some areas we're confusing equity with equality, and they're two different things. So should we identify equity somewhere in here so that when we speak it, everyone knows exactly what we're talking about?
All right. So yeah, thank you so much, Commissioner Clark. So you're talking about goal number 3. Obviously, we're going to have a separate discussion, or not a separate discussion, but that we're getting to that next. So if there are any other changes though to our first goal, to the metrics of the first goal, which is just the finance piece.
Well, we used equity in goal number 1 also.
Yes, there.
Okay.
All right.
All right, let's look for some other hands. I am not seeing anyone.
I have a hand up.
Go ahead, Ms. Simmons, go ahead.
Yes, I just have a question around the financial condition. Again, some of the terms do seem very general, but I wanted clarity around, in previous discussions, I've overheard or heard you all discuss how some of the contracts or what have you kind of roll over, and at some point they were not necessarily measured or remedied from year to year. Is there contingencies to have that implemented in this language, or is that part of the general language that I'm looking at? Is there intention to practice making sure that those policies and those programs that we're providing monies to that are looked at, instead of going 10 years, are we looking at them every 3 years, updating and looking at how they mesh with the district?
Do you think that would be part of like cost efficiencies in a way?
Right, and so how do we make sure that the language is specific enough to understand that that is the actual action that will be taken? Those are just questions I have. I think we want to make sure it's spelled out.
And that may have to be in a separate document, because, and I'm sort of contradicting myself, but goals need to be broad enough, and then we get specific in again, I may be answering my own question from earlier, and then we get into specifics from the goals. So it may not, we may not need to be specific on each task per se, but broad enough that whatever the tasks are, that they fit under our goals. And I'm not sure if I'm clear on that, but
yeah, you're answering the question perfectly, and that's kind of the question. Is there something that spells out what the what actions are happening? So and it may be a separate document. I'm just wondering if there's something that spells these type of things out, because they are general as goals.
Yeah, Camille, I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think a lot of this is spelled out later on when we do our board self-evaluations, and we use these this information. Well, the language is clearer in the board self-evaluation tour and in our super eval tour tool rather. And then of course the superintendent is using these goals to drive her own goals and set the policy for the day-to-day operations of the district. And then we will look at our goals, and it's all a very symbiotic relationship with the superintendent's goals.
Thank you.
And so Commissioner Malloy, I don't know if someone said this before, but we're talking about now under bullet 3, adopting the 22-23 budget, correct?
Correct.
That's what be our goal. Okay.
Correct. All right, I'm looking for other hands. Does anyone else want to add commentary to our first goal, which is improve the financial condition of RCSD? Any other changes that we would like to implement? Oh, I see Commissioner Powell's hand.
I would like to hear Commissioner LeBron's reaction to my proposal that we have a fourth bullet, but in the comment section, I just kind of played it out with Commissioner Clark's suggestion. The idea of inefficiencies being part of the language of inefficiencies, the deficit description could be replaced by the phrase improving efficiencies. You know, it's just about looking at the glass in a positive light instead of negative.
Commissioner LeBron, did you want to comment on that as a finance chair?
Yeah, I'll comment. I just want to, one, I support Commissioner Powell's suggestion that we make it into a fourth bullet. The second piece, though, in terms of the word efficiency, I don't want us to stray too far from the fiscal plan that's in place, because there was some alignment done around our board goals with the plan. So as long as it's still in alignment, so that we don't have a strategic plan, a fiscal plan, the state monitor's plan, that we're all like working in multiple plans. And I've said this before, if we're moving in multiple directions, we're not moving anywhere. So as long as we're all staying on the same path with these plans, with the goals for the board, the goals for the superintendent, I'm okay with that.
Thank you.
So Dr. Jallo has a statement maximizing revenue sources. Dr. Jallo, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was saying everything here is around, you know, having a balanced budget, watching the parameters and the costs associated with your budget, but you have revenue sources that need attention to make sure that your financial condition is also improved. So it's not just about cutting and managing and monitoring, it's also looking at ways that the district does gain revenue and making sure that you're providing that equal amount of attention to those sources as well.
I think Commissioner LeBron had mentioned that that was part of the addition that she wanted in what she had mentioned before. So thank you. Dr. Jallo, did you have any other recommendations though for the first?
For this one? No.
All right, thank you. Dr. Myers-Small, sorry to put you on the spot.
Except the year change, right?
Right, naturally. Dr. Myers-Small, do you have any suggestions that anything you would like to share with the board about our first goal?
Thank you, Commissioner Moyne. Certainly, good afternoon. No, I like the recommendations that I've heard, and I agree with all that has been submitted or suggested.
Thank you, Dr. Myers-Small.
Well, can I, I'm not, I don't know where the hands are. I didn't raise my hand.
Go ahead.
Okay, but to what Dr. Jallo was asserting, I'm questioning how does that relate to the statement in their funding sources? Is there something around what Dr. Jallo is asserting and relating to funding sources that can be aligned? Or are those two separate pieces? And maybe Dr. Jallo, if you can comment on that.
So, okay. I'm sorry, I'm trying to multitask. So yeah. I'm thinking of things like how well you manage your charter funds, how well do you manage grant funds, how well do you manage your Medicaid reimbursements, how well are you making sure that when you get a grant, you spend it to the fullest and don't return any money, those type of things. And none of these bullets exactly address that. So I want to make sure that, you know, it may not fall into this situation, but somewhere that we are also looking at those things when we look at the financial condition of the district.
And then Commissioner Powell put a note in about maximizing revenue sources and improving efficiencies to improve district financial positions. I don't know if that gets to what Dr. Jallo just said about, you know, putting a focus on those items that she just spoke about.
Thank you, Vice President. I do see Commissioner LeBron's hand. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, I just want to add that when I brought up increasing revenues, that it is exactly that. I don't know that we have all of these massive opportunities to raise revenue, but certainly there have been areas identified that we could be doing more efficiently, more effectively, and increasing revenues that way. But I do think that there are some opportunities to potentially raise revenue in other ways. Certainly the Medicaid one is one that we're working on currently because we know that there's an inefficiency there. But if we were to be more efficient, and I will say it's not all of the district's fault for the inefficiency, there is some cross collaboration and contractual things that we need to look at with the county as well, which we're working on to increase those revenues. But again, seeking opportunities. I would not want to just say 3 bullet points to spell out revenues because there are multiple avenues, I believe, for the district to increase revenues over time.
Thank you, Commissioner LeBron. Vice President Elliott, did you want to add something? I see something in the chat from you.
Yeah, I was thinking as Commissioner Powell wrote, and then to what Dr. Jallo had said, and I wondered if the term, something to the effect of strong oversight of district revenue sources, and I don't know if we would get specific in there, talking about what the examples that the state monitor just referenced, but I'm thinking if we're talking about a 4th bullet, then maybe that kind of language could be a part of the 4th bullet, if that's what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you so much, Vice President. I do have a question for our board clerk and possibly for our acting general counsel. If we make any changes to these bullets today, does it have to be done real time and then we vote on it here? Or is this something that we're talking about here and having a discussion on, and then we edit the document and then we vote on this later? And I do see Commissioner Powell's hand. Were you going to answer that, or? Oh, no.
Well, it wasn't an answer to that, but as I'm hearing feedback from folks, I'm kind of acting like an editor, and I just put in the chat what the language might look like, keeping in mind Commissioner LeBron's last point about not just maximizing revenue, but also increasing, max, to use Dr. Jallo's word, but also increase to address what Commissioner LeBron suggested. I'm just positing this as the actual language we might use for a 4th bullet.
Kalia, can you speak to what we would need to do for the changes to be implemented?
Well, to answer your question right now, because I'm sharing my screen, and I might do this a little bit differently for the second one, but I'm jotting down all the points, and then, and Commissioner Powell, very helpful. Thank you for putting that stuff in the chat. I'm going to try and update the document and track changes. That's what we usually use as a board, so that persons can understand where we left off and where we came from. And then hopefully we can present that at the Tuesday meeting in policy. We have a policy meeting coming up, and then the board could consider it at that point. I don't know that we'll be able to do all of that and do a vote today with the understanding of this is the clean document that you're going to vote on. So I think in between that space as well, I can share the track changes and stuff so that people are prepared to come and make that vote come Tuesday.
Thank you, Clerk. Thank you. Let's see. Oh, Clerk Wade, I'm sorry. I'm like looking at 3 different places here. I see President White's hand. President White.
Yeah, I was just going to basically say what Talia said. I think if your question was, what is the next step procedurally, I think we would come to an agreement as to what these goals are, and then we would just vote on them at the appropriate day.
Okay.
Memorialize them, make the corrections. But I think on the next available day, we just vote on them.
Okay.
I don't think it requires a resolution, just a simple vote.
It sounds like we've reached a consensus, I think, on our first goal, the metrics, and adding that 4th bullet, which obviously we'll see those changes later. Are there any final comments regarding our first board goal? All right, so moving on, our second goal, which is to improve academic performance. I do want to highlight that at our board retreat, when we were doing that brainstorming activity with that Dr. Jallo helped lead us through, I think we all seem to support the idea of earlier intervention or identification of students at earlier grade levels for targeted help with and how that could lead to better graduation outcomes. And I think we all agreed that maybe beginning at grade 6, we should see those types of interventions taking place, instead of waiting until the end of 8th or 9th grade. So I would agree with this addition to our metrics for this goal, but I know there are probably other thoughts on things that should be added as part of our metrics for this. So are there other suggestions other than what I've mentioned? I see Commissioner Powell's hand. Go ahead.
Thanks. If you could throw the language up in chat until we have some other avenue to do that. The only thing I would suggest is not putting a specific grade level for intervention, because truthfully, depending on what you're trying to provide intervention for, you need to be starting much earlier. I mean, if, for instance, if our goal is to have children reading at grade level by 3rd grade, if we're not getting that outcome, then the intervention should be starting at 3rd grade, not waiting until 6th. Right. So I'm just suggesting a bullet around intervention is a really great idea, especially if we've already have a sense that the board wants to go that way. But I would just ask that we not put a specific grade level on it.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Powell. I know I was just quoting from what had been perfect. Thank you so much. And I think it was on the next page or further down. There we go. So I'm assuming that the ones that were highlighted in red were those that there was a lot of common agreement around. So that was why I had suggested that, that we look into that a little further as a board. And certainly I respect what Commissioner Powell said regarding this, just that perhaps we don't put a specific grade level. Is that a newer hand or is that a seasoned hand? Okay, seasoned hand. Okay.
I have a question.
Oh, Dr. Jallo, go ahead.
Yeah, so this one is really very important, of course, but I think the board has to ask the question in administration, why do you think you're not seeing the achievement that you want to see with your students? And once you can answer that question, that might help you figure out as a board what you want to attack or what you want to address in this goal, because all of these are good, but which ones are really going to have the greatest impact in improving student outcomes? And, one might say literacy and the ability to read. Others might say other things. But I think you have to have a conversation, at least to some degree, as to unpacking why you're not seeing the achievement that you would like to see for your scholars in Rochester.
Okay, so whatever language around intervention that we include, if we're going to add intervention as a bullet, also needs to include why we're not seeing that, right?
Yeah, I would argue why you even need intervention. I mean, why aren't children learning in the first place? What's going on? Intervention comes afterwards. So what is it that's preventing the teaching and learning process to produce the type of scholars you want to? Because I don't want to just put it on the kids. It might be something in the building, it might be something with teachers, it might be something with administrators, it might be something with parents. What is it about that? And then I think that might be one approach to help clarify what you want to focus on as a board.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jallo. I do see President White's hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to, for lack of a better phrase, endorse that concept, because for years, we've known that our ELA and math portions of our students were performing at abysmally low proficiency levels. But I don't know, so people immediately begin to talk about solutions. Intervention is one of them. But I don't know if people really had, from administration to administration, conversations about why they think those indicators are so stubbornly low. And I think that would be an excellent place to start, because quite honestly, from administration to administration, and understandably so, they focus on the solution, which you would think reflects their underlying issues or beliefs about causation. But I don't know that we've ever really explored it. So I don't know that necessarily how that fits into this document. But I do think there ought to be some exploration as to what the underlying reason for the deficient performances are.
President White, thank you so much for pointing that out. I, just as governance chair, I'm thinking ahead to future professional developments for us throughout the year. And as we go to plan these, these goals are supposed to drive our work throughout the year. And so certainly I'll be working with board staff, and perhaps we can get some professional developments underway so that we can have these types of conversations as a board, so we can unpack these things a bit more. So thank you so much for that. I do see Ms. Simmons, your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, very healthy dialogue. I think the why and the what's happening, that the interventions are needed, are exactly what needs to happen. When you ask the right questions, it'll lead you to the answers, is always my thought process. And so, for example, the 6th grade interventions by 6th grade, maybe it is plausible to not put the grade limitations on there. But why 6th grade? I'm liking that to almost the high school graduation outcome. So when you take a look at the fact that our students are coming into the 9th grade not prepared and behind grade level with their literacy and things of that nature, that lets you know things need to be happening well before the 9th grade timeframe, to make sure that we're assessing students and keeping a pulse on those things so that they don't get to the 9th grade unable to achieve academically and socially or what have you. So I think the conversation is very healthy, and that's what I believe that one actually meant.
Thank you, Ms. Simmons. I do see Dr. Myers-Small. Go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. A couple of things. As we look at this achievement goal, a couple things. I think we really need to focus on the fact that this year, and really at least focus this year, the fact that we do have unfinished learning. And so some of the barriers that we definitively know is that some students did not engage, or they learned solely online, which impeded their ability to, access content, et cetera, and that it's impacted them socially and emotionally. So I think that's kind of one part of this one piece of this that we might want to take a look at. And then the other thing is, when Dr. Black has come before the board, and when she comes before, frankly, principals or others, we know that there are things that we're focusing on to address this. Grade level content every day, and definitely President White and Vice President Elliott heard that when we went to School 28 recently, that is something that we're focusing on, that our scholars have to have access to high quality, not only materials, but educators, and that they are engaged. So as we think about what those kind of 3 areas look like, I don't have the answer right now. I can email something, but I'd like to work with them to kind of get that woven in, the unfinished learning and the fact that our scholars have learned many have learned in a remote environment, and then the grade level content. So I don't have it perfectly packaged right now, but if you'll give me liberty, I'll look at that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Myers-Small. And I do see that Commissioner Powell has put a suggestion in the chat box, but she's just raised her hand, so I'll let her go ahead and present that. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. It's just what I wrote was just an attempt to merge again some of the ideas I heard. And it reads, respond to incomplete learning. This would be a new bullet because obviously incomplete learning is a phrase we never even heard before COVID, but new bullet would be respond to incomplete learning and support early interventions. Just as a thought.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. Dr. Jallo?
Yeah, my only challenge with that is that it doesn't address where the learning actually takes place, and that's in the classroom. So, you know, how to say that you're going to support incomplete learning, what does that mean for you as a board? Right. What does that look like? Feel like, what is that? And that's why, no, this is not about what you're saying per se. I'm just saying overall as a board. Mm-hmm. What do you mean you as a body are going to address incomplete learning?
Well, that's my point is if our goals drive the superintendents, then for us to have a goal that says, you know, respond to incomplete learning and support early intervention, the superintendent comes up with the early interventions and the response to incomplete learning. And our role then is to be as supportive of the superintendent's plan as we can possibly be given our financial circumstances. So I think that the sentence responds to what to your concern. You know, we're not the experts, that's a superintendent's job. So the language in our goals is going to be necessarily passive. That is to say, our role is to be in a support role, you know, support interventions, not do interventions. That's not our job to do.
No, I'm not suggesting that you do intervention. What I'm suggesting is, do you believe that if you as a body support incomplete learning and interventions, that will increase academic achievement?
Well, I guess short of a round robin, I guess I would answer in the affirmative.
Okay.
Yes, you're only hearing from one person there, so
right.
I'm just trying to get you similar to what we did during the summer, that everything you put here, you believe will result in that bigger goal.
Thank you, Dr. Jallo, and thank you, Commissioner Powell. I do see other hands. Vice President Elliott, go ahead.
With regard to the third bullet, I don't know if I would be able to articulate that to a parent or to a community person. You know, what are we talking about when we say equity, quality, and consistency? As from a board perspective, you know, what, because I'm carrying, and we all individually will be carrying the message of the board. So how do I articulate what equity, quality, and consistency mean in the K through 12 curriculum? So I think we're going to have to dive into that so that we're all speaking the same kind of language, because with that particular bullet, we all have different meanings and ideologies with regard to what those terms mean: equity, quality, and consistency.
Thank you so much.
In the curriculum.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. And I'm thinking, you know, with these goals, especially in your committee, the ESA committee, that might be the perfect place to start some form of like professional development for all of us, just to have that discussion and really unpack that a little bit more. If you would entertain that perhaps during ESA. I think that's a really good idea, just because we do need to be able to articulate that to the community. Thank you so much. I see other hands have been raised. Let me look here. I see, Ms. Simmons, go ahead.
I just wanted to also state that we also want to identify what those actions from the board would look like. So although we are identifying goals or what have you, and the superintendent is finding ways to execute or the implementation portion of those goals, there are specific actions that the board should take. And does that look like advocacy? What are our actionable truths and measurements? What are we specifically doing to execute the goals that we have set are imperative and important to us? And so it is not a matter of dictating what the district operational piece does, but also what does that support look like in action from us? So I would love to make sure that we're spelling those pieces out as well to engage accountability, if you will.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ms. Simmons. Let's see, let's look for any other hands. Is that a seasoned hand, Vice President?
Oh, yes. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
All right. So are there any other comments regarding our second goal? Any other changes we would like to see made or anything more specific we would like to see in the metrics? I'm not seeing
Then
anything.
following up on what Vice President Elliott indicated regarding equity, quality, and and consistency, we need to, make sure that we have that defined somewhere so that it is a consistent message. Other than that, I'm in agreement.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Clark. All right. Oh, go ahead.
Lloyd?
Yes, go ahead.
In the overall statement on the increased academic achievement, one of the things I want to make sure that we're doing is that we're aligning our coursework or our curriculum with the opportunities that are in our community. And so somehow I'd like us to consider revising this statement so it alludes to that whatever that we are being a good steward in our community by ensuring that we are graduating and preparing students for the jobs that are in our community. And so if some way we could put that kind of language in the overall statement, that's what I'm recommending for us to do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Vice President Elliott.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a thought here too, and I'm speaking from a teacher perspective, but at the start of every class, I always have my objectives up on the board, with a key driving question for my students. And I'm wondering if, to help keep us more focused on these goals, if perhaps during our committee meetings, we have like a portion of goals that we're, highlighting during all of our committee work so that we know like what our focus is for that particular meeting or which goal we're attempting to address during a specific committee meeting. It might be good for the community education piece and just good for us as well to help us stay focused on these goals throughout the year so that we're not just like doing these goals now and then revisiting them in June. Just a thought I just had off the top of my head. All right, any other comments around, we see Commissioner LeBron, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to add, just in the conversation of equity, it just kind of reminded me that we don't really have an equitable way in how we even fund our schools and budget for them, and that the board has the authority to do that. We make these comments like our schools are not equitably funded, but the board makes those decisions. And so I just want to say our expectation is to have equitable academic outcomes, that we also need to equitably fund our schools and figure out what metrics we'll use to do that and make that happen. And that's all I wanted to say. I don't know where it fits in the goal, if it's in the finance or adding a finance goal or tying finance back to the equity goal, but I just don't think we're going to be able to fully achieve equitable academic outcomes if we don't equitably fund our schools with the resources that they need. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question, Ms. LeBron?
Yes, you sure can.
So I think that's an interesting point. Do you believe that if schools in Rochester were more equitably funded, that academic outcomes would increase?
I do. But here's
it sounds
the thing.
like finance, but it really hits number 2.
Yeah. And yes, Dr. Jallo, but let me just be clear. I'm not talking about state funding or federal funding. I'm talking about our own budget and how we fund our schools and provide the resources to them.
But if we did that, you believe that academic achievement would improve?
I do.
Okay.
Dr. Jello, I believe if the schools were equitably equipped, we would get comparable outcomes. And that means putting the best teachers where they're needed the most and making sure that our students who need more resources have those more resources in their schools. So it goes funding and staffing and
so you're talking holistically resources, equitable distribution of so you believe if there was an equitable distribution of resources, academic achievement would improve?
Yes, especially if we like I said, if we had the correct resources in addition to funding in the schools that needed it, more.
Thank you, Commissioner Clark. I do see quite a few hands that have popped up here, and I saw some people shaking their heads and stuff too. So I'm going to start. Vice President Elliott, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say to Dr. Jallo's question, I would say no. We can have all the money in the world, but if we do not understand students who are from an urban environment, if we don't understand that we're going to have to work very hard because of the various issues some of our students come into our school with, if we just look at them as students and don't have the kind of expectation we're supposed to have, we can have $1 trillion and we're still not going to get it done. There are some internal issues and organizational issues, I believe, contribute to the fact that we are unable to educate the students in the Rochester City School District. And I think that money is not the panacea. We have to look at what our systems, how our systems are interacting with each other. We have to make sure that we have sustainable stability in our leadership. There are a whole host of non-monetary tasks that we need to have in place. I'm not saying that money won't, we can't use money for, but it has to be for specific programs. We have to find out really where our needs are and then address money to those needs. We go from being like a $300 million district to now $1 billion district, and we still don't seem to be able to educate our kids. I believe that if we can do those points, that we will be able to educate the children in the city of Rochester.
But I want you to know, I'm posing these questions to push your thinking. I started off with Commissioner LeBron about money. And then I got Commissioner Clark to say resources. Mm-hmm. Resources could be anything. How you allocate your teachers, how you allocate your money, how you allocate your time, how you allocate your buildings, how you allocate your, So if you make a broader look at it, if you believe, what I'm hearing now is not what's on this paper, what you are passionate about and believe about what will increase outcomes. And if you're going to go through this exercise, I want to, at some endpoint, it to really reflect what you as a board believe will help you financially and academically and as it relates to equity.
Can I just,
Dr. Jallo, Vice President Elliott?
Yeah, I just want to follow up on Dr. Jallo's point and then to what Commissioner LeBron was saying. If we can go back down to can we go back to the financial goal? Because to what Commissioner LeBron is just suggesting, that probably should be a bullet under the financial goal, that all schools have equitable funding. So that's a consideration that we place.
If all schools have equitable funding, will that increase the financial condition or will that increase academic achievement or both?
Okay.
Yeah, these are great questions.
Well, it may do both.
Possible.
I don't have a response to what under the financial condition under number one, but it may be both.
Thank you so much, Vice President Elliott. I do see some other hands. Ms. Simmons, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm loving the conversation because it's going into something that I enjoy very much, which is like really around systems change. And when we recognize that the district functions as a system and there, in some cases, a dysfunctional system that we can rectify, then we can start looking at those components. So I think all the answers are coming in, and I like what Dr. Jallo is doing as far as calling out those pieces. Is it this and or what have you? And so when I'm thinking about the system that we're functioning in, I'm thinking about not only our funding resources, our practices. And so again, this is all great rhetoric and language, but what does that really break down to? And how are we creating strategies and tactics around these pieces? How are we incorporating race when we talk about equity? What does racial equity entail? How are we addressing implicit bias and things that are affecting the school climate of the students? How are we looking at our ELL and special education students as well? How are we lifting that to really create a system of equity, which is all encompassing? So I think there's a lot of work that can be built out. Again, probably in a separate document, but I'm loving the conversation and excited about going into that space.
Thank you so much, Ms. Simmons. Commissioner Adams.
Yeah, so I totally disagree with anybody who suggests that money doesn't play a factor. When they take a look at our district, we're leaking. There's no retention. We're losing some of the best teachers and administrators in the district. And money is the factor. That's why we're losing them. We're losing bus drivers. We're losing kitchen workers. And it's all, and for us to pretend like money don't play a factor, we're just going to keep losing. We're going to keep losing. We got to focus on some retention. We got to do what we got to do to keep these good teachers instead of paying people to come out of retirement, because we're probably paying them too much money to come out of retirement. But money is a factor. It's going to make things happen. We're leaking, and to stop the leaking, we got to spend some money.
Thank you, Commissioner Adams. Thank you. Commissioner Powell.
Okay, so I don't have any proposed language yet because I don't think we're done with this conversation, but it started with a phrase from Commissioner Elliott. It says, well, what does equity look like? And my internal dialogue was, well, it looks like a child can go to any school or transfer to any school at any point in time and not lose ground and be receiving the same quality instruction in their classroom, regardless of what school they landed in. And then the very next point that was made was Commissioner LeBron about financial equity across schools. And both of those lead to a potential new bullet under goal number 3, increasing equity for all students. And Dr. Jello asked the question, well, what, will that improve academic performance? And Commissioner Clark said resourcing will, yes. I mean, if you have an even distribution of seasoned teachers with longevity, that are master teachers, that are able to coach and mentor other teachers across all buildings, I think we'd have better success district-wide, because I think one of the contributing factors to poor outcomes is low morale among teachers, which is often the case when a school is the school where all of the brand new teachers end up getting placed, because that's where all the vacancies are, whether it be due to retirement or teachers voluntarily leave because they don't like the principal, or pick your poison. But having said all of that, I'm concerned that language that might speak to equitable funding, I don't think we're ready for that yet, because I don't know what the superintendent has in mind for what equitable funding looks like. And I kind of think that a 4th bullet under equity probably needs to be something like, begin to study, begin to analyze the component parts of equitable school funding. We can't mandate, for example, that an equal percentage of seasoned teachers be present in all schools. Our collective bargaining agreement allows teachers to, request transfers. And I'm not sure how. Maybe by studying it we could find out, but I'm not sure how we can ensure a balancing of resources across all our districts, a balancing of effective PD in all of our schools. There's a lot that goes into creating the equity and of opportunity that we describe in goal number 3, bullet 4 of ensuring district-wide equity, quality, and consistency. And if we're talking about it from the standpoint of funding our, budgeting for our schools, I think the best that we could hope for in this year, and it would be a bullet that we could refine in future goal setting, would be to study what opportunities exist for improving school, equity in school funding, or words to that effect. I just came up with that on the fly.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. I do want to, perhaps you could put some of the suggested wording down in the chat box. I did want to highlight that Commissioner Adams did just put something really valuable in the chat box. That he states that retention equals stability and supports academic achievement via relationships. And I 100% agree with that, and just wanted to highlight that on public record so that the public were aware of it. So thank you, Commissioner Adams. I do see another hand, Commissioner LeBron.
Yeah, so I just want to be clear, a couple of points. I'm not saying, again, that I'm saying that we need more money from the state, more money from federal. I'm saying that and also I just want to highlight that equality does not equal equity. And so I heard equality being used, and I'm not saying that schools should be equally funded, because our schools are imbalance with, some schools are overloaded with special education students or multiple language learners. And that we already have data around what our schools, how they're funded, why they're funded that way, because that's required for us to submit to the state, to be more transparent about how the school district, all school districts in the state of New York really fund each school. But regardless if it's not a goal this year or not, the board still does have the ability to create some type of way to ensure that each school is funded equitably. So let me just also point out, Dr. Jallo, that when I first brought this up, that it really was the fact that I know that there are students who are multiple language learners or even bilingual Spanish speaking who don't have access to textbooks. That's an issue in this district. And if they don't have access to textbooks or materials in Spanish, regardless of the handouts that are being given out now sporadically, that there is going to be some direct impact on their academics. And this has been going on for a number of years. The other piece is even the school climate or environment. I want to uplift that Franklin over the summer, but also spring and going into the summer when they're still in session, because they don't even have air conditioning and the building is over 100 years old, that it is extremely hot in that building. They don't even have air conditioning units the way that they should in these classrooms. But I mean, those are the things that I'm talking about: the environment, the access to resources, textbooks, materials, curriculum. None of our schools, I can confidently say this, that I have an understanding as a board member of how our schools are funded within our own dollars. I'm not asking for more money. I'm saying that we look at how we equitably fund and distribute the budget to schools, and that we ensure the students and the schools that are overloaded with special ed and multiple language learners also have the resources that they need. And I don't think that they do, and I absolutely think that that has an impact on the academics.
Thank you so much, Commissioner LeBron. I'm really glad that you brought that up. Very true. I'm really enjoying this healthy discussion that we're having, and certainly I hope this is opening doors to future discussions and professional developments, and maybe future retreats where we can really dive deep into this, all of these important topics. Quick question: are there any other changes that we would like to see implemented now for the second goal for increasing academic achievement? Were there any final topics or final comments on that goal? Because I think our discussion is going to lead us into our final goal, which is equity.
Commissioner Malloy, when you first asked, I was I was not on Zoom when you wanted a consensus about the goals and the metrics. And I can't remember what number 4 is, but somehow we need to put in a relationship with our parents. And I don't know if we do that under academic achievement, but you know, I just see that the role of parents is huge, should be huge for the board and parents, community, and have that as either a fourth bullet or somehow we put it under number 2, or you know, and I'll open that up for my other colleagues to weigh in on that. But I think we have to have some relationship as a board to our parents in our community.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Vice President Elliott. I'm glad that you brought that up because we know that parents play such an integral role in their kids' education, and parents who feel like they're part of a system and can be heard and are truly being heard, not and listened to. That makes, you know, it's part of the entire equation for success. And so thank you for bringing that up. I would love to see us discuss this more. I do see some hands that have come up. Commissioner Powell, go ahead.
Yeah, this actually responds directly to Cynthia's. If we're ready to move on to goal number 3, I really do not understand the first goal. The reason I don't understand it is it starts evaluating a study on community partnerships. That implies there's already a study, and I'm not sure there is. It might have been better last year to say commission a study, but I'd like to hear more from the superintendent about where we're at with that. But the reason I think it's a good link is that studying community partnerships for ensuring quality and return on investment, parent relationships could very well be inserted into that bullet point as well. But mostly, I'm not sure I understand the value added of this first bullet without having somebody explain it to me.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. Dr. Myers-Small, not to put you on the spot, but is there a study that has been done on community partnerships?
So it hasn't been finalized, but Kelly Briggs, who's the Executive Director of Strategic and Community Partnerships, actually has started this work to look at all of the different entities and partnerships that we have, nonprofit, profit, higher education, etc. So we haven't finalized that rubric, but when she got hired, this was one of the very first things that we talked about. And so she's developing that, but we don't have a report because it's not finalized, but she has started the work.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Myers-Small. Commissioner Powell, is that a seasoned hand?
Yeah, that was the comment I just said. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so that brings us to our third goal. And thank you, Commissioner Powell, for moving us along there. So I do want to highlight in terms, I know we started talking about that first bullet, but I do want to highlight that a lot of work has been done on this third goal. And I especially wanted to kind of uplift Commissioner Adams and the role that he has played throughout the year and just advocating at the state and local government level. We had perhaps our best legislative breakfast to date. So I just want to offer kudos to Commissioner Adams for all of his work that he's done this past year. We've seen some veritable political wins at all levels, including in terms of our foundation aid. And I don't have specific metrics on this goal that I'd like to necessarily see changed, but let's start the discussion. Are there, other than what we've heard from Commissioner Powell about the first bullet, are there any other changes, any other thoughts by the commissioners? I'm looking for hands.
Yes, I did have one thought. Sorry about that. I couldn't get to the area where I raised my hand. But this was another area where we talked about bullet 2 in particular on third goal. And this is, I think, where confusion come in when we talk about equity and we say per student spending. And we need to make sure that we're not talking about, again, and I heard Commissioner LeBron state this also, that we're not talking about equality. We're talking about per student spending, making sure each student gets an equitable share of the resources, because some students need more, others may need less, you know, when you look at special education, English language learners and others. So this seems to, when you read it, it seems like we're talking about equality and not equity. And should that really be in there?
Thank you, Commissioner Clark. Vice President Elliott?
I just wanted to go on record because I've heard a statement indicating that while we talk about Black and Brown students, that somehow we're not including white students as well. And let me just say that is farthest from the truth. In my history and understanding history, particularly around civil rights, and particularly because this is a majority student of color school, and that's why some of us focus in on Black and Brown students, but it does not mean that we are not also being inclusive of white students as well. That seems to be a narrative that is going on out in the community. We certainly are, but we know that when we do focus in on the issues where we are the weakest in our community, that because we are strengthening those who are the weakest, everybody benefits. And so I want to make that clear that when we're talking about equity for all, while it does include the students in this district who are students of color, it does not negate that we are not doing all that we can on behalf of white students as well. So I needed to put that out there because it seems to be a criticism that is out there right now. Everybody will benefit. And when we look at the history of the civil rights movement, when the African American agenda has been first, everybody benefit. But when we do talk about for all, and although I am talking about all, when it comes to the African American agenda, that agenda gets marginalized when you look at history. So, but let me just state again that we are talking about every student that's in the Rochester City School District, but we're not as strong until we provide those resources to the ones who are the weakest. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner, Vice President Elliott. Do we have any other comments on number 3, goal number 3? Any language that we would like to see changed?
I did provide language in the chat for a potential 4th bullet.
Okay.
I
Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Adams, sorry.
I personally don't like the word revisiting the 2016 study of managed choice policy. I think something more definite should be. It should be to read something more definitely. We need to make a decision about it or something. But revisiting it is like just glancing at it, and I don't know. I just think we need a stronger statement about that.
Thank you, Commissioner Adams. Commissioner Powell.
I really appreciate Commissioner Adams' concern. The verb is not a very strong verb, but on the positive side, we are moving in the right direction. I mean, we was last month or end of August? It was actually the end of August. We, as a board, approved a resolution to a consultant to begin to study our the impact of our managed choice and make some recommendations. I'm not sure what the right verb is to replace revisit. I agree it's a weak verb, but however we phrase it, the work is beginning.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. I too agree with needing to change that, and we've done so many studies on this. This has been around for years and years, and it is time to take action, in my opinion. Commissioner LeBron.
Yeah, I want to uplift that too with what Mr. Commissioner Adams just said, but also I know that we did just hire a consultant, but I second that we have lots of studies and We've even had board commissioners like hold community groups, and we also already had a consultant that gave the board recommendations. And so for a word replacement, I would like to say that for a word replacement, we actually say that we're going to vote and finalize a plan that moves away from the managed choice policy. And that's what I would support. I don't want to say that we're going to analyze, look at it. I'm sick of looking at it. I'm just ready to move on with what that recommendation is going to be for the board to vote on, and move forward so that we can move forward. That's it. Like that we start and implement for the next school year.
Thank you so much, Commissioner LeBron. And I really like the verbiage that you just used to say finalize, right? Like we've got to take action on it. So thank you for, that's a great suggestion there. I do see other hands. Ms. Simmons.
This is more of a question. I'm looking at, of course, number 3, and I see placement practices, I see funding, I see community partnerships, and when we're talking about equity for all students, and of course that affects the equity among our schools and resources available to our students. And my question, I guess, is more about holistically, when you think about the person in equity. So we have a diverse group of students. We know that we're 90% Black and Brown students, number one, to Commissioner Elliott's point. But we also have students, English language learners, and students with special needs or what have you. So are we spelling out specifically that part of our student? Because, you know, you can give them a textbook, you can give them resources, and they can have access to the things that they need to be a well-rounded academic scholar. But if the interactions that they're having are counterproductive to those pieces, that can be damaging as well. So what are we doing? And I think I asked this earlier, to address things like implicit bias, things that affect our special education students, and English language learners. And I may have missed something in that space.
Thank you so much, Ms. Simmons. Agreed. I know that's warrants certainly further discussion, and whether, I mean, perhaps we need to make that more specific right here in by adding a bullet, perhaps. But agreed on all accounts, in my opinion. I do see a lot of other hands that have come up. Commissioner Powell.
I was going to try to tap out a suggestion for that second bullet. Let me preface my suggestion by saying we've had a lot of discussion and conversation about managed choice, but we actually have not had a proper study of it for a very long time. And when I say a proper study, I mean reassessing our building capacity in a post-FMP phase 1 and phase 2 world, looking at the distribution of students since in the last, when this was created, it was 2 censuses ago. So where our children are may have significantly changed. So, yeah, and then we need to look at the impact of how the administration has actually implemented the policy. So in order to for the administration or anyone else to recommend changes to the way we do things, we need to know what our current state is. And truth be told, no matter how much we've talked about this, we do not know definitively what our current state is. So my suggestion was going to be that we strike the phrase revisiting the 2016 study of managed choice policy, and strike that and start the bullet with conduct a review of the I mean, that might not be completely adequate, but because I'm not sure what the charge was to the consultants that we approved a contract for, but at the very least, if we are engaged already, we have started in the conduct of a review at the very least. So if we could strike that opening phrase, I think we'll be further along I'm not satisfied with it, but we'd be closer to the truth if we do that.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. Vice President Elliott.
You know, this policy, I mean, this particular goal is weak. You know, I'm and I was going to try to say it wasn't strong enough, but let me just, you know, tell the truth and shame the devil. It's weak, and I'm not sure what we need to do, how we make it stronger and that it means something. This may be where, you know, we can use some of the language of the real team. I'm just not sure. I just think that this is we need to work on this one. Because it doesn't say anything as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I'm reading what we're talking about, but it's just not strong enough in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President. I'm looking to see if there are other hands up, and let me see. Dr. Myers-Small, is there anything that you would like to add in particular to the increasing equity for all students goal?
One of the things that, thank you, Commissioner Malloy. One of the things that I have Dr. Morris working on, I'll call it an equity report card for lack of a better term at this point, but we're looking at different achievement points, courses and exams. We're looking at, honors classes and things of that nature. And so we're trying to make sure that the participation or the success rate or whatever the metric is, it truly measures the demographics that exist in our district. So I don't know if maybe you want us to come back just something around that equity report card or whatever we call it. But that is on the horizon. We've been working on that since over the summer. So that's something that we want is going to be a companion document to our strategic plan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Myers-Small.
Does that help?
It does. It does help. President White, go ahead.
Yeah, on the issue, and perhaps people aren't ready to tackle this as a specific goal, but in terms of equity for all students, one would think that would also include Black and white students, Latinos, having access to a diverse teaching staff. It seems to me that this district has struggled for years, and it's not that we haven't addressed this issue, but and not having a very diverse, somebody said earlier on, and rightly so, about 85–90% of our staff, of our students are students of color, but I think 80–85% of our staff are white. And that's not good for Black students, but it's also not good for white students. And so I don't know if that, if we're ready to tackle that. I know we've tried, but it seems to me that if you're talking about equity, that's got to be a big part of equity. Do you have access to competent, capable, but a diverse staff? And right now, the baseline suggests we don't give that to our students. And it could be a national issue, just a shortage of teachers of color, particularly Black males, but maybe or maybe not. I think that at some point has to be a goal of this board to diversify our teaching staff.
Or at least one of the metrics towards equity, correct?
Well, I thought about that. Is it an indicator? Is it part of that metrics, or is it something that should be a goal? I think if you say, and I'm not an expert at these kinds of things, but if you say our goal is to have a more diverse staff, sure, a metric would be how diverse is that staff. But I think you have to have that goal first. If you just have 3 bullets to talk about equity, and an equity statement, which is reflected in number 3, but it doesn't mention how that you have a goal relating to equity that discusses your teaching staff and what they look like. I think it could get lost. So in other words, I did think about that, Amy. Is it an indicator? And it certainly is. Or is it something that you should call out? And given where we're at, I don't see how we could not at some point, maybe it's not next year, but I don't see how at some point we would not have to say, this is a goal of ours. Because it's really shocking. It's almost like it's almost like apartheid. It's almost like segregation. If you look at the community and how this community of Monroe is segregated and the schools are segregated, but you also look at the teaching staff. It's really unconscionable. So anyway.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So you're not suggesting though that we change our goals for this coming school year, that this be something that we look at in the future? Because we've all agreed to roll over these goals, or we came to that consensus earlier in the meeting. So this would be in the future that we should consider this as perhaps a fourth goal for our district, if I'm hearing you correctly, President White?
Well, the only reason why I mentioned that is the only reason why I mentioned that now is I heard you say to the superintendent, are there any other things, and I think your statement was a few minutes ago, is there any other things that we should add to this equity goal thing? And that's what triggered me thinking, oh, well, teaching. But, yeah, that's fine. But I think at some point we have to tackle that as a goal.
Right. Thank you very much, President White. I do see Vice President Elliott. Oh, I think she's frozen. Can you hear us, Vice President? Okay, so I'll just move on to Commissioner Clark.
Yes, I wanted to respond to the comments made by President White, because I agree that, that should be one of our goals, but unfortunately it's a goal that we don't control. And the reason I say that is because we know with the state LIFO system, no matter how much recruitment, how much diversity we bring in, whenever there's a shortfall in the state budget, or whenever we have to reduce, the last hired is first fired based on state. So every time that happens, all of our diversity and all of our work walks right out the door. So, and I know Commissioner Adams addressed this a little in the last legislative policy meeting, but I think that's something that we really need to take up with our lawmakers, because we should be able to come up with some kind of policy that would at least protect a percentage of the diversity that walks in the door. Otherwise, this is just gonna be a constantly reoccurring situation. So my question is, if we put it here as a metrics, and it's a metrics that we don't really control, how do we be accountable for it?
Right. Good point, Commissioner Clark. Thank you. I'm looking for other hands.
Commissioner Malloy?
Oh, go ahead, Vice President Elliott. Are you back?
I froze, so I'm on my phone.
Okay.
I think that we need to have an understanding of what we're benchmarking ourselves against. So we use the term equity, but how are we measuring? Are we saying that based on what the average graduation rate for the cities, for the school districts in the suburbs, that we're going to reach, say, 80%? Say if that's the average graduation rate of the schools in the suburbs. Is that what we're saying? I'm looking at, I think for me at least, I'm not sure, and we can have a conversation about this, but that first bullet, I don't know how that first bullet really has a direct impact on increased equity for all students. I really don't get that one. And in all honesty, the managed choice policy, I don't know if it's the schools themselves, because they're all a part of the Rochester City School District. We only have so many good schools. I'm not sure if that may be, a high priority. Maybe it is, but I just have some, issues with that. For me, it's about sort of like to what the president talked about, ensuring that we've got, equity in terms of teachers of color, ensure that how are we measuring graduation rates? How are we measuring ELA and math scores? You know, those kinds of things in terms of equity for all that, in my mind, those are the things that we should be trying to ensure that we are achieving, you know. So I just would put that out there as a recommendation, because this seems to be, you know, kind of all over the place as far as I'm concerned. And as I said earlier, you know, it's not as strong as I think it should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Elliott. So I am hearing like general consensus. Before I move on to, I've got other people who've got their hands raised. Certainly maybe rewording some of these bullets for clarity might be something that we really want to make sure we do. So that we'll be doing that, and then we'll have the track changes that we can all agree on, I hope. But it sounds like people are generally not as happy as they maybe could be with some of the wording here or what other additions made. I do see Commissioner Powell's hand. Go ahead.
This is so small, but I got to say it anyway. All 8 of the metrics for the 3 goals above the last one use the gerund form of the verb. So, except the last one just says advocate. It probably should read advocating, just for consistency's sake.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell, for bringing up gerund. Grammar expert. All right, thank you so much. Point taken. And moving on to President White.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was a problem pressing the buttons. The research, you know, this is back to what Vice President Elliott just said, referencing what she said, and the question you raised, is this an indicator or metrics of our success or failure? The research, and I'm sure all of you have heard this, clearly indicates that students of color perform better when they have access to teachers of color. So that shows you, I don't know, it might be the difference between a leading indicator and a lagging indicator, but that shows you that having a diverse staff should be a goal, because it leads to increased performances on certain indicators. So that was the first thing I wanted to point out. So I think at some point it has to be, I would think, it has to be a lack of diversity in your instructional team has to be addressed as a goal. And then the other thing, I had another point I was going to make about equity. Let's see, students, and I can't remember what that other point was. So again, I just think the research suggests that if you have that as a goal, you have better performance. Mm-hmm. And if I remember the other point, I'll raise my hand again later.
Thank you, President White. I would like to see, I mean, just personally, now that, you know, so many people have brought this up, perhaps we can make a 4th bullet, and to address that, we need to rewrite some of these other bullets, but adding that 4th bullet along the diversification of our staff, at least as a common or as a metric to that equity. I don't know how people feel about that, but perhaps we can add a 4th bullet. All right, just a thought, but I see other things.
Amy?
Go ahead.
Amy, I do remember what I was going to say. And I'm going to, and my daughter-in-law, she's Latinx, he's obviously African-American, are a perfect example of this issue about teaching and what we control and what we can't control, which is going back to Commissioner Clark's comment. I made the mistake early on in my career on the board, like many of you, being very frustrated with the lack of diversity. And I knew that my son and my daughter-in-law, both graduates of this district, would have been real assets. And I communicated that to the superintendent. As you all may recall, that memo, that email got out. And my email was written in the context of a long battle that I have had with this district about the lack of diversity as a lawyer and as a board member before my son came back. And I simply said to the then superintendent, I said, well, geez, you got these 2 students of color, graduates from the district, and they couldn't even get jobs as substitutes. So to Commissioner Clark, I would say, yes, there are things that state controls, because using my son as an example, he ended up being a victim of, he worked for the district, got tenured 6 years, he eventually got employed by the district, worked for the district for 6 years, and he was ultimately a victim of last in, first out. So you're right. LIFO does have an impact on the lack of diversity in our district. But at the same time, I have seen personally and professionally throughout this district as a lawyer and as a father, because I lay witness to what he and my daughter-in-law were, the fact that they tried to apply. I have seen this district not make an effort to recruit students of color coming out of teacher colleges. At one point, some of you may recall, we had, and I forgot what the reason was, Willa, Cynthia, you may remember this. We had an exodus of teachers for whatever reason. There might have been an incentive. It was like 600 teachers. And I forgot the exact number, so I'm not gonna put a number up, but a very, 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 very small percentage of the teachers that we hired were teachers of color. And some of you may recall, in an auditorium, I think it was East High School, or it might have been Monroe, I called to question why we weren't hiring more teachers of color. So Bill, I would agree with you. I'd be stupid if I tried to, that there are statutory things like LIFO that prevent us from doing what we need to do. There are also strategic things like less than 1% of teachers coming out of teacher colleges are African-American men. So there are things that are beyond our control, but I have personally witnessed over the years where we have not made an effort to recruit and retain. And if you look at the data that Harry did for us, that we had a problem years ago of getting rid of people of color. So I think eventually when you all decide, if you decide to put it up here as a goal, you will find that yes, while there are things extraneous to us as a district that have prevented us from becoming a more diverse district, you will find, as I have found over the years, that there are things that we are doing as a district that prevent us from becoming more diverse.
Thank you very much, President White. I do see some other hands raised, but I do want to just remind all our board members and those who are participating that it is 5:40. So I know that we have to go offline at 6 o'clock. We will no longer be live streamed. So we've got to move the conversation along just a little bit. So I'm sorry, everything has been so valuable, but we are recording all these comments that you're making. And we're going to present the track changes and a clean copy with a new version of the document before Friday for offline review, and then have it ready for Tuesday consideration. So all of these comments are being recorded, and Kalia has been really great about doing all that. I'm sure she's capturing everything from the chat as well. I do see two hands. I want to say, Ms. Simmons, go ahead.
I'll keep it brief. I do want to just echo what Mr. White or President White said, as far as I'm familiar, at least with his daughter-in-law. And yeah, that's a great loss for the district, I'll say. And, the same experience happened with my sister her first year in. She's 12 years now, but she was laid off in her first year as a teacher of color. So that is something that on a legislative level has to happen. I do believe this should be a bullet, and it needs to be a bullet now. I don't think it's we can look at it in the future piece. I think what we prioritize in the here and now speaks volumes to where our priorities are. So I would love to see that added on as a bullet along with racial equity and implicit bias.
Thank you so much, Ms. Simmons. And just kudos to your sister, who was one of my daughter's 4th and 5th grade teacher, and just the experiences in her classroom, how wonderful that was, and how all families benefit in this district from having a diverse staff. And I didn't have my first Black teacher until I was a sophomore at the University of Rochester.
And it makes a big difference.
It makes a huge difference, and everyone benefits from this. And so I just want to elevate that as much as I can. I do see, so thank you again, Ms. Simmons, for those comments, and I agree that it should be a bullet. Commissioner Powell, go ahead.
Okay, I did throw some potential language up there. It would be a 5th bullet if we buy into conversation a while back about equitable funding being a bullet. But aside from that, I do have one more observation. I keep going back to this first bullet because it seems so weak. And in particular, as I read it, to ensure equality and return on investment and respond to proposed policy changes. There are no proposed policy changes right now, I can tell you. Now, because we haven't got results of a study, maybe there may be some proposed changes. So just the insertion of the word any and respond to any proposed policy changes would make that bullet more meaningful to me personally.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. I'm looking for, I see lots in the chat.
Commissioner Malloy, since
Oh, yes,
I'm on
go
my
ahead.
phone, I can't, I'm not
raise your
sure
hand.
how to raise my hand.
Go ahead.
But I just want to comment about how valuable having teachers of color is going to be. I grew up in an elementary school where it was segregated and lived in the segregated South. And that sense of community is what can be missing when there is no one who looks like you and who can appreciate your experiences. I will also say, when you look at the historically Black colleges and universities, that's the connection that many of us need. And I wish I had been able to attend a HBCU, because it makes a difference when you're living in a society that views color. But when you are with people who you connected with, then you have the ability to be able to be resilient in a society that views one superior to the other. So I just wanted to echo what the president has said, and also what Commissioner Clark has said. And Amy, to your experience, with your teacher, it makes a huge difference. So I just wanted to echo that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice President. Commissioner Powell, is that a seasoned hand or anyone?
Yeah, it's old.
Okay. I wasn't going to use that term. I was going to say seasoned instead, which I did. All right. Are there any other hands I'm looking to see? I don't see any. All right. Well, I do want to say thank you to the board for all of your work and focus today. I know that the start of any school year is extremely challenging, and we've certainly had a transportation crisis thrown our way in the past month. So I'm just really pleased that despite all of this, that we've been able to accomplish a little bit today and have this discussion. I want to say one last thank you to Tom and the whole tech crew and the board staff for making this happen. It's on such short notice. So with that being said, because I know we have to be off here by 6, can I get a motion to end our work session today?
So moved.
Can I get a second? All right. So with that, I officially close the governance work session, and I hand the gavel back to President White.
We got to get an official vote on that motion.
Oh, we do. I'm sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
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 And so that's going to
Any
conclude.
opposed?
No opposed. That's going to conclude this session. Now, I did know that our interim general counsel wanted to speak to the board about a personnel matter, a confidential matter involving legal advice. So if Steve is still in the room, I'd ask everybody but the board to leave. Leslie, I know you are technically a member of the board, but I would ask that you leave. And Dr. Jallo, I would encourage you to stick around if you can.